Thereafter, I proceeded to analyze the circumstances in which Jammu and Kashmir Constitution Act of 1939 came into being, and then considered the submissions under different heads. Read out my conclusion. More or less, the conclusions are same, except in one of the aspects of Premnath's Kaul's case, I have taken a slightly different route. That's all. So, the relationship between Union and State of Jammu and Kashmir, the concept of internal sovereignty after the IO. I am of the view that this question has been decided by the coordinate bench of this court in Premnath Kaul that the state did not lose all semblance of its internal sovereignty, which would include deciding upon the forms of government of the state upon signing of the IO. The distinguishing feature as compared to the other states was that a slightly different path was followed for the accession of state of Jammu and Kashmir by recognizing the Constituent Assembly to be formed for the state. The route of assimilation of state of Jammu and Kashmir was through Article 370. Then I've heard that I've taken note of the various factors such as Article 370's historical context in the text and subsequent practice to conclude that Article 370 was intended to be a temporary provision. As a corollary, there was a mechanism to bring the whole arrangement to an end. The effect of the power under Article 373, once exercised, would be that the article shall cease to be operative. In other words, the mechanism was meant to de-recognize the state's internal sovereignty. Thus, the exercise of power under Article 373 meant that for purposes of the Constitution of India, only the Constitution of India would apply to the Jammu and Kashmir and not any other constitution, that is the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir. The purpose, then on Article 373, I have said, the purpose of the Constituent Assembly was to draft a constitution for the governance of the state. On the other hand, the purpose of Article 370, as noted above, was to slowly bring Jammu and Kashmir on par with the states in India. It can hardly be contended that the second and in some ways a larger purpose would be effected by the fulfillment of the first. The second purpose remained an ongoing exercise long after the State Constituent Assembly was dissolved. Thus, the conditionality in Article 373 of the requirement of a recommendation from Constituent Assembly cannot be read in the manner as to make the reference to the larger intention of the provision redundant. B. The next question is to determine what process is to be followed by the President to exercise the power under Article 373. The President can exercise this power under Subclause 3 without a recommendation from the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly. When the Constituent Assembly ceased to exist, only the power of the Constituent Assembly to make the recommendation ceased to exist. That is, the proviso to Article 370 became otious. The main provision, which is the President's power to issue a declaration, continues to exist. C. Now coming to the impugned action, first the amendment of Article 373 through the route of Article 367 was invalid. When a methodology has been provided, that methodology would have to be followed and an amendment through the back door would be impossible. D. Concurrence with the government of the state was not necessary to apply all provisions of the Constitution of India to the state. Although Article 371D requires concurrence with government of the state, in this case, the governor of the state had dissolved the Legislative Assembly of the state. There were no Council of Ministers, and the President had reduced to himself all functions of the government of the state under the 2018 proclamation as extended. Then on the exercise of power under Article 356 were permissible while issuing COs 272 and 273. Article 356 can be imposed once the Legislative Assembly has been dissolved, particularly since Section 92 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution limited the governor's role to 6 months without any scope to extend. This imposition was predicated on the failure of the constitutional machinery, which really took place prior to the government's rules. Then B. Article 356 permits the President to make irreversible changes. Both Savanji and Reddy J and S.R. Momai recognized that irreversible actions in this case, the de-operationalization of Article 370 is permitted if the proclamation had been approved by the Parliament prior to such irreversible action. C. The President reserves both legislative and non-legislative powers after the proclamation of emergency. Though Article 356 is continuance of Article 356, the former does not stipulate any bar or restriction on the Union Parliament or the President to exercise non-legislative power of the state legislature. And I've dealt with the challenge to Section 3 and 4 of the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. A. The challenge to Section 3 of the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act on the touchstone of Article 3 is not required to be debated on account of the assurance on behalf of the Government of India that statehood of Jammu and Kashmir would be restored on elections being held. B. It is imperative to ascertain the views of the state legislature under the first proviso to Article 3 if the proposed bill affects the area, boundaries, or name of the state. However, in the instance case, since state of Jammu and Kashmir was under President's rule and the state legislature was already dissolved, the functions of the state legislature were performed by the Union Parliament. Hence, it was not possible to ascertain the views of the state legislature. It follows that Section 3 of the Reorganization Act is valid. I have penned down an epilogue at the end of the judgment, maybe some sentiments involved. The Valley of Kashmir carries a historical burden. It has a social context. Thus, in involving constitutional status of the region, it is difficult to segregate the aforesaid. We, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, are at the heart of the debate. They have carried the burden of victims of conflict for several decades, originating from 1947 with the invasion of the valley. Intervening political circumstances did not permit a redressal to the fullest extent of the invasion. The consequences remain in terms of parts of Kashmir being occupied by other countries.